Welcome to NibblePop Stories. Today I'll tell you the story of Virgil's Aeneid. Earlier, we explored the Iliad and the Odyssey, the tales of the Trojan War, and the Greek hero Odysseus's long journey home. But today, we turn to the other side of that great conflict, the Trojans. This is the story of a man whose journey to seek a new homeland will shape the destiny of mankind itself. This is the tale of Aeneas, the hero who would carry Troy's memory through fire, loss, and hope. The Romans called it the Aeneid. Aeneas was a brave prince of Troy. He was known for his courage, kindness, and wisdom. People looked up to him for good reason. He was the son of the goddess Venus, known to the Greeks as Aphrodite, and a mortal prince named Anchises. Part human, part divine, Aeneas grew up beneath Troy's golden rooftops, learning the arts of war and the ways of kings. For 10 long years, Troy stood strong against the Greeks. The Trojans and their allies fought outside the walls, hoping to protect everything they loved. Finally, it looked as though the gods favored them. The Greeks, exhausted and desperate, sailed away. At least that's what everyone believed. Only one thing remained: a huge wooden horse left at the city gates as a supposed offering to the gods. The Trojans thought the war was over. They pulled the horse inside, proud and celebrating. Families rejoiced, feasts broke out in the streets, and laughter filled the halls. But peace doesn't last forever. That very night, as Troy slept soundly, the bravest Greek warriors slipped out from the hollow belly of the horse. They crept through the shadows, surprising the guards at the gate. In a moment, they opened the doors for thousands Greeks waiting outside. Troy exploded in chaos. Houses burned, people screamed, and the invaders spared no one. Not women, not children, not the elderly. While flames roared through the city, Aeneas was sleeping, exhausted from battle. In his dream, the spirit of Hector, Troy's great defender, appeared. Wake up, Hector urged. Troy is falling. You must save the sacred objects and find a new home. The gods have bigger plans for you. Suddenly awake, Aeneas saw the city burning. He strapped on his armor and rushed into battle, but even his courage could not change fate. The Greeks were too many. Troy was doomed. Desperate, Aeneas ran to save his family. He found his wife, Creusa, and his son, Ascanius, and his old father, Anchises. But Anchises refused to leave. He wanted to die in Troy. Then, above Ascanius's head, a small flame appeared, a sign from the gods. Anchises understood at last. Their family was chosen to keep the memory of Troy alive. He agreed to go. But leaving Troy would not be easy. Years before, Anchises had been struck down by a thunderbolt from Zeus. Why? He had once loved Aphrodite, who disguised herself as a mortal and bore him a son, Aeneas. She warned him not to reveal her secret, but Anchises could not keep silent. Zeus punished him with a lightning bolt that left him weak and slow. As Troy crumbled, Aeneas lifted Anchises onto his back and led his family toward the meeting place for survivors. In the panic, A crowd separated him from Creusa. He searched the burning city, but she was gone. Her spirit appeared to him. Don't be afraid, she said. The gods will guide you to a new land. You are meant for greatness and glory. Heartbroken but determined, Aeneas gathered his son, his father, and the last Trojans. They escaped through the night to Mount Ida, where they rested and planned their future. Anchises reminded the group of an old prophecy. You, Aeneas, are destined to become the heir of Troy's legacy. Someday you'll found a new city, and the children of Troy will grow strong and rule many lands. So began the journey of Aeneas, the survivor of Troy, carrying hope, sorrow, and a dream given by the gods. After escaping the ruins of Troy, Aeneas hoped to find somewhere safe. Their first stop was Thrace, a place that had once welcomed the Trojans. When they landed, Aeneas wanted to thank the gods for their protection. He built an altar and gathered wild flowers to decorate it. But as soon as he picked the flowers, red blood flowed from their stems. Aeneas was horrified. Had he wounded a sacred place? Suddenly, the ghost of Polydorus appeared. Once a young prince of Troy, Polydorus had been sent by King Priam to Thrace for safety during the Trojan War. But after Troy fell, the king of Thrace betrayed him. He killed Polydorus to steal Trojan gold. Now the spears that killed the prince had taken root, turning into the bloody plants Aeneas had touched. Polydorus' spirit warned Aeneas to leave. The people of Thrace had turned against the Trojans. It was no longer safe. Before leaving, Aeneas held a small ceremony to honor Polydorus. A life ended far too soon. It seemed the Trojans had enemies everywhere. They did not know if any land would welcome them again. Lost and uncertain, Aeneas and his followers sailed through rough winds and waves, searching for hope until they reached the island of Delos. There, the great temple of Apollo stood in shining marble. The king of Delos greeted Aeneas warmly, offering food and rest. Seeking guidance, Aeneas and his father stood before Apollo's oracle. The oracle's voice echoed through the temple. It told them to search for the land of their oldest ancestors. Aeneas's father believed this must be Crete because Teucer, one of Troy's first forefathers, had lived there long ago. The Trojans sailed to Crete and built a new city called Pergamon. For a while, everything seemed good. Temples and houses were rising, and the people felt hope again. But fate had other plans. A sudden drought turned the fields to dust, and sickness spread through the people. Fear returned, and the Trojans begged Aeneas for answers. Unsure, he decided they must ask Apollo for help once more. That night, while Aeneas was sleeping, he dreamed of the gods of Troy. Among them was Teucer, the great ancestor. The gods revealed the truth. Crete was not their destined land. Jupiter, king of the gods, did not want them to settle there. His wife Juno hated the Trojans and brought bad luck to all who tried to live in Crete. Their true home would be in Hesperia, an ancient name for Italy. It was the land where Dardanus, Troy's first royal founder, had come from long ago. Aeneas awoke with a new purpose. Now he understood fate was calling them to Italy. Their journey was far from over, but the gods had shown them the way. After leaving Thrace and Crete behind, Aeneas and his weary Trojans sailed their ships once more. For 3 long days and nights, raging storms chased them across wild sea. The skies were black, the stars disappeared, and strong winds tossed their ships in every direction. Not one sailor knew where they were or what waited ahead. Finally, the winds eased. A faint stretch of land appeared, an island called Strophades. Grateful, the Trojans rowed ashore and hoped the place would be gentle. At first, the island seemed peaceful enough. The Trojans found wild goats and were happy they had food after so much danger. Before eating, they made a sacrifice to Jupiter, thanking him for leading them there. But Jupiter was silent. He did not want to risk angering his wife Juno, the goddess who hated the Trojans and always tried to block their path. Just then, trouble came swooping out of the sky. 3 ugly winged monsters began to descend. These were the Harpies, creatures who looked half woman, half bird, ancient and cruel. Wherever they went, food rotted and the very air stank of filth. The Trojans tried fighting back, but no weapon could wound these monsters. Each time the harpies were driven off, they returned, shrieking and clawing at the Trojans' meals. Finally, Aeneas told his men to ambush the monsters. The fight was fierce. The harpies filled the skies with heavy wings and terrible screams. In the chaos, one harpy, Selino, rose high and shouted a curse. You Trojans will suffer and starve, she screeched. Before you build your new home, hunger will force you to eat your own tables. The Trojans stood silent and afraid. They didn't know whether Selino's words were prophecy or madness, but they took it as a warning from the gods. Aeneas gathered his people, and together they hurried back to their ships, leaving Strophades behind, but carrying dread and hope in their hearts. They trusted the journey would lead them one day to the true land of their fate. When Aeneas's ships finally reached Italian waters, hope rose among his people. They could almost smell the land they had dreamed of for so long. But just as they felt ready to celebrate, another trial appeared. Before them was the strait, guarded by 2 ancient monsters. One of them was Charybdis, a huge beast hiding beneath the waves. She swallowed the sea itself, making a giant whirlpool that pulled in anything nearby, sucking ships to their doom. On the opposite shore, danger had another face. There, in a dark cave, lurked Scylla, a monster with 6 serpent like heads, each one ready to snap up anyone who passed too close. Many sailors before Aeneas had died at her hands. But Aeneas and his men remembered the warning of the wise seer Helenus. With steady hands and pounding hearts, they rowed their fleet between these two terrors. They kept as far as they could from Charybdis's deadly whirlpool and hugged the water away from Scylla's rocky cliff. Rowing together through the safest part of the strait, the Trojans escaped both monsters unharmed. Soon they reached the coast of Sicily. There they saw Mount Etna, a gigantic volcano spewing fire and smoke. People said that beneath the mountain the giant Typhon was trapped, crushed there by Zeus after he dared to fight the gods. Every fierce eruption, they believed, was Typhon trying to break free in anger. The Trojans rested on the shore. Aeneas saw that his father Anchises was growing weaker each day from the endless hardships at sea. One night, a stranger visited the camp. He was covered in rags, shaking, and clearly in need. His accent revealed he was Greek. He knelt before Aeneas, begging for forgiveness and help. He had fought with Odysseus of Ithaca against Troy. But when the other Greeks had escaped the island of the Cyclopes, he was too sick to keep up and was left behind. For years he had hidden from the giant Cyclops, Polyphemus. As the stranger finished his tale, the ground shook. It was Polyphemus himself, the huge one eyed monster Odysseus had blinded long ago. He stumbled out of his cave, but could not see the Trojans. Aeneas and his men kept quiet and slipped away before the giant noticed them, taking the lost Greek with them to safety. But as they sailed on, Anchises, exhausted by years of struggle, felt death nearing. Before he passed, he spoke his final words. He reminded Aeneas to protect their people and never forget the destiny the gods had given them. Aeneas built a funeral pyre and honored his father on the shore. Now only Aeneas and his young son remained from the royal family of Troy, a family that had once been mighty but now carried the hope of a new beginning in a distant land. After many long trials, Aeneas and his men sailed ever closer to the land promised by the gods. Their hearts were tired, but hope burned bright. Surely Italy, their new home, was just ahead. But in the world of the gods, not everyone wanted the Trojans to succeed. Years earlier, a Trojan prince named Paris had chosen Venus, not Juno, as the most beautiful goddess. That wound never healed. Worse still, there was a prophecy. Someday a great nation born from Troy would destroy Juno's favorite city, Carthage. That fear and anger made her determined to block Aeneas's journey. So Juno climbed high to the palace of Aeolus, the god of the winds. She begged him to unleash their power. Suddenly, the calm sea turned wild. Dark clouds gathered, thunder rolled, lightning flashed, and huge waves smashed the ships. Sailors shouted in terror as the wind shredded their sails. Some ships vanished, claimed by the furious waters. Others were thrown far apart, lost in the storm. But someone else was watching too, Neptune. The god of the sea hated that Juno had stirred up chaos in his area without his permission. Lifting his mighty trident, Neptune struck the sea. The sky brightened, the sea stilled, and Aeneas's battered ships rose again on calm water. Still, not every ship survived. The ocean took some of them, but most of Aeneas's companions found land at last. What they did not know was that they had arrived in Libya, in North Africa, a land ruled by people who came long ago from Phoenicia. Hungry and tired, Aeneas went hunting. With his bow and arrows, he brought down 6 deer, sharing food among his friends to give them strength. High above, on Mount Olympus, Venus, the goddess of love, looked down anxiously at her son. She could no longer bear seeing him suffer. Venus went to Jupiter and pleaded for mercy. Why must Aeneas struggle so much? She asked. Jupiter reassured her. Do not worry. No matter what Juno does, destiny will win out. Aeneas will reach Italy. His descendants will be rulers greater than any before: Julius Caesar, Augustus, and more. The world will know their power. Down on earth, the story took a new turn. One day, as Aeneas hunted in this strange land, he met a beautiful woman dressed as a hunter. There was something magical about her. Aeneas guessed she was a goddess. And he was right. It was Venus, his own mother, disguised as a Libyan huntress. She gently explained to Aeneas where he was. This was Libya. She told him about Dido, queen of this land, who had once been a princess in Phoenicia. Her brother had become king and murdered her husband for his gold. Dido had fled across the sea to Africa, taking gold with her and building the city of Carthage, a place that, with help from the gods, was growing powerful. Juno hoped Carthage would one day rule the world. After their meeting, Aeneas found his lost ships and friends returning to him. It seemed the gods were once more guiding his journey. Now he knew what he had to do. He would follow his mother's advice, travel to Carthage, and meet Queen Dido. The next chapter of his adventure was about to begin. After many struggles at sea, Aeneas and his men finally arrived in Carthage, a rich city ruled by Queen Dido. When Aeneas and Dido first met, they were amazed by each other. Dido was strikingly beautiful, and Aeneas, the son of Venus, had the shining looks of a hero. But not all the gods were happy to see this meeting. Venus, the loving mother of Aeneas, worried for her son. She knew Carthage was Juno's favorite city, and Juno hated the Trojans. Wanting to protect Aeneas, Venus turned for help to her other son, Cupid, the god of love. Cupid disguised himself as young Ascanius. When Dido hugged the boy, Cupid secretly shot her with a magic arrow, making her fall deeply in love with Aeneas. Dido had once promised never to love anyone again after her husband's death, but now her heart was changed forever. As the days passed, Aeneas and Dido grew close. They shared many things. Both were from royal families, both had lost the people they loved, both had left everything behind to build new cities. But while Carthage was strong and thriving, Aeneas's dream still lay far away across the sea. One day Dido invited Aeneas on a royal hunt. She led the way in her chariot, graceful and fearless, bow in hand. When a sudden rainstorm forced them to take shelter together in a dark cave, Dido confessed her love. Aeneas, drawn by her spirit and devotion, could not resist. From that moment, they were bound together as lovers. But nothing escaped the eyes of the gods. Juno saw everything. Wishing to make peace between their peoples, she made a plan with Venus to unite Dido and Aeneas, hoping their union would turn into a powerful alliance. Venus seemed to agree, but in her heart she remembered Juno's tricks and never truly trusted her. Happy days followed at first. The two lovers ruled together, Dido caring for her people and Aeneas helping her strengthen the city. But peace cannot hide forever. Rumors spread through Carthage and neighboring lands. Some whispered about the queen's new love. One man, King Iarbas, who wanted Dido for himself, grew jealous and furious. He prayed to Jupiter, begging for punishment. Jupiter heard the prayers. He sent Mercury, the quick footed messenger god, to Aeneas. Mercury reminded Aeneas of his destiny. You must leave Carthage, he warned. You are meant to build a new city in Italy. That is your fate. Aeneas's heart was torn. He didn't want to leave Dido, but knew the gods could not be disobeyed. Quietly, he gave the order to prepare the ships in secret. But Dido discovered his plan. She was heartbroken and felt betrayed. How can you leave me? She cried. Still, Aeneas could not remain. He finished his preparations and sailed away, leaving behind the woman who had loved him more than anyone in the world. Dido's grief was too much to bear. In her pain, she built a giant fire in the palace courtyard. On it, she placed all the gifts Aeneas had given her, reminders of their brief happiness. In front of her people, Dido took Aeneas's sword, cursed the Trojans, and plunged the blade into her heart. She fell among the flames, ending her sorrow forever. Far out at sea, Aeneas and his men saw the fire lighting up the night and heard distant cries from the city behind them. The journey would go on, but the price of destiny was paid in heartbreak. After leaving Carthage behind, Aeneas and the Trojans sailed for many days across the open sea. Sometimes the waves were stormy, sometimes gentle, but always the dream of a homeland led them on. At last, familiar shores came into view, the island of Sicily, a place that had offered them shelter once before. On Sicily, a warm welcome was waiting. The king, Acestus, whose mother had once been Trojan, met Aeneas and his people with open arms. He offered food, a place to rest, and peaceful company. For a little while, the Trojans felt safe again, grateful for every bit of kindness. But peace is often short lived for those chased by gods. Juno, who still burned with anger and grudges, had not forgotten them. Determined to block Aeneas, she sent the rainbow goddess Iris to the island. Iris found the tired Trojan women and the weary elders and spoke to their hearts. She reminded them how long they had been at sea, of the dangers, the storms, the endless wandering. Many, already homesick and frightened, now wanted only to stay and find peace in Acestus's land. Before Aeneas realized what was happening, the women and elders, moved by longing and fatigue, set fire to the ships. The flames leaped into the sky, and voices rose, declaring that they would rather stay than keep struggling forward. Aeneas watched in despair as some of his best ships burned. It felt as if all his hard work might be lost. But Jupiter, king of the gods, would not let every hope be destroyed. He sent thunder and heavy rain from the heavens. Lightning startled the crowd, and the sudden downpour put out the fires, saving many ships from ruin. That night, as Aeneas lay troubled and unsure, the ghost of his father, Anchises, appeared. Anchises told his son that Jupiter wanted only the strongest warriors and the healthiest young women to go on. The old, the sick, and those whose hearts longed for rest could stay and build a life in Sicily. The rest should take the saved ships and head for the land fate had promised. At dawn, Aeneas did as his father advised. He gathered those who were ready. The others, at last, found peace in a new home with King Acestes. They named their settlement Acesta. Finally, Jupiter declared that Aeneas's trials must end. He ordered Juno to stop stirring trouble and Neptune, god of the sea, to calm the waters. The sea grew blue and gentle. With the wind in their sails, the Trojans set out for the last time. After many days, they saw it at last, the coast of Italy. Their ships glided to rest at the mouth of a river called the Tiber, in a land called Latium, home to the ancient Latin people. There, on the soft banks, the Trojans cooked their food. With little to serve upon, they baked broad, flat cakes from wheat and used these as plates. They put fruit and hot food on top, eating both the meal and the bread beneath. Suddenly, young Ascanius laughed. Look, we are eating our own tables. His joking words made Aeneas remember the Harpies' curse, that the Trojans would only settle when hunger made them eat their own tables. The prophecy was fulfilled. At last, the Trojans knew their long journey was over. Here, at the banks of the Tiber, the story of Rome, the city that would rule the world, was about to begin. Aeneas and his people finally touched the soil of Italy, the land promised by the gods. But a new world means new rulers, new jealousies, and new dangers. After landing in Italy, Aeneas and his people built a camp near the grand palace of the local people, the Latins. Their leader was King Latinus, a wise and kindly old man from a long line of kings and gods. King Latinus had no sons, only a daughter, the beautiful princess Lavinia. Many brave young men wanted to marry Lavinia, but none were more admired than Turnus, a local prince, a strong and skilled warrior. Turnus dreamed of the throne for himself and grew jealous at the thought of an outsider taking his place. But ancient prophecies spoke clearly. The oracles had warned that Lavinia was meant to marry a foreign prince with divine blood, that their children would someday rule the world. So King Latinus waited for fate to reveal who this stranger would be. One day, Aeneas's messengers arrived in the Latin city. The townsfolk were nervous and suspicious of the newcomers, but King Latinus greeted them warmly, honoring Jupiter's wish for peace. The Trojans shared stories of their long journey, their struggles, and their hope for a new life. As the king listened, he realized the truth. The prophecy pointed to Aeneas. Filled with hope, Latinus invited Aeneas and his people to join his kingdom. He promised Lavinia as Aeneas's bride so the Trojans and Latins could become one great family. As a sign of welcome, he gave Aeneas golden chariots and beautiful horses. But, as always, not every heart was ready for peace. Juno watched from above, full of anger at this new alliance. Determined to ruin their happiness, she sent the dark spirit Alecto to stir up hatred and war. Alecto crept into the palace and whispered poisonous words into Queen Amata's heart. The queen, suddenly angry and afraid, began to protest the idea of her daughter marrying a foreigner. Her fear spread quickly, turning many other Latins against the Trojans. Then Alecto found Turnus. She filled his mind with fury, and soon he was calling his men to arms. We will fight the Trojans, he swore, and not stop until every last one is defeated. It didn't take long for things to fall apart. In the fields, there was a gentle pet deer, beloved by a shepherd's daughter, Sylvia. The deer followed her everywhere and drank from her hand. Wanting trouble, Juno led the deer toward Ascanius, Aeneas's young son, who was out practicing his hunting. Ascanius spotted the animal, drew his bow, and fired. The arrow hit its mark. The wounded deer stumbled home, and when Sylvia saw her friend bleeding, she broke down in tears and begged the other shepherds for help. Furious, the shepherds grabbed their weapons and rushed to attack the Trojans, not knowing whom they were fighting. Soon, the green fields of Italy echoed with the sounds of battle. Word of the murdered deer galloped through the countryside, growing wilder with each retelling. And so, just when peace seemed possible, the flames of war swept across the land once more. Turnus, raging with jealousy and ambition, gathered a crowd and led them to the palace of King Latinus. He demanded that the king declare war against the Trojans. The old king longed for peace, but Turnus and the queen used fiery words to stir anger and fear. Soon, almost everyone was swept into the excitement, calling for battle. King Latinus grew afraid. He feared he would never see peace again. Among Turnus's followers stood Camilla, a fearless woman warrior from the fierce Volscians. Proud, fierce, loyal, she stepped forward to fight at Turnus's side. Pressure on the old king grew with every passing day. According to custom, the gates of the temple of Janus, the god of beginnings, had to be opened to show that war had begun. King Latinus wanted none of it. He held the keys tight, hoping for another way. But Juno came down from the sky herself. She flung the gates wide open. The spirit of war was free, and the crowds cheered, believing that the goddess who once led the Greeks to victory at Troy would help them again in Italy. Far from the noise, Aeneas stood in silence, feeling hopeless. The Trojans were brave and determined, but they were few against so many. In the quiet of night, the river god Tiber rose from the water. Do not lose hope, he told Aeneas. Most of the gods are with you. Juno alone stands against you. Sail upstream and find King Evander. The Tuscans are your friends and will help you in battle. Aeneas believed the god's words and set out. When he reached Evander's city, he was welcomed with kindness. The old king, too weak for war, sent his best soldiers to join Aeneas, including his own brave son, Pallas. Meanwhile, far above, Venus went to Vulcan, the god of fire, and her husband. She pleaded for special weapons for her son. Vulcan worked through the night, forging strong, shining armor and a magical shield showing glimpses of Rome's future glory. When the gifts were ready, Aeneas put them on and felt his strength and courage return. But as Aeneas searched for allies, Juno worked on her own plan. She sent Iris, the rainbow messenger, to warn Turnus. The Trojan camp is undefended, she hissed. Turnus rushed with his army for a surprise attack, but the Trojans, trained by hardship, stayed inside their walls and waited for their leader. Frustrated and angry, Turnus called his men to surround the camp and set fire to the Trojan ships. Yet the flames brought a miracle. The ships, built from the sacred pines of Mount Ida and blessed by Cybele, mother of the gods, would not burn. Cybele heard the prayers and pleaded with Jupiter for help. Suddenly, the ships burst from the flames, transformed into living sea creatures that slid into the depths. Turnus and his men were stunned, realizing the gods still guarded Aeneas. But Turnus did not lose heart. Trusting in Juno and his own strength, he gathered his army, even more determined to crush Aeneas and chase the Trojans from Italy forever. Turnus and his warriors marched forward, ready for battle. The Trojans, though few in number, were strong and experienced. They had survived 10 long years fighting the Greeks at Troy and knew how to stand their ground. Suddenly, Turnus set fire to one of the Trojan watchtowers. The tower crashed down, smashing a hole in the wall and opening the way. Without delay, Turnus and his fiercest fighters rushed through the breach into the Trojan camp. The Trojans were caught off guard and struggled to fight back at first. Turnus blazed through the defenders, his sword flashing, his eyes burning with determination. For a moment, it was as if mighty Achilles himself had returned to the battlefield. But the Trojans were not willing to surrender. Young Ascanius, the son of Aeneas, stepped forward with the courage of a hero. He took careful aim and shot Remulus, Turnus's brother-in-law, with his arrow. That single act reignited the fighting spirit of the Trojans and began their counterattack. Ascanius was ready to face Turnus himself, but just then the god Apollo appeared. He warned Ascanius that fighting further would mean certain death. Remembering the fate of Patroclus, who died facing Hector in Troy, Ascanius wisely stepped back and left the battle to the more seasoned warriors. Still, his bravery had inspired his companions, and they fought harder than ever. Turnus, never backing down, challenged Pandarus, a celebrated Trojan warrior. Both fought fiercely, but in the end, Pandarus fell. His sacrifice gave the Trojans time to regroup and press their foes. Turnus spent his strength battling champions one after another instead of opening the gates for his allies, giving the Trojans the opening they needed to surround him. As the fight drew on, Turnus found himself trapped. Arrows and spears rained around him as Trojan fighters closed in. Desperate, Turnus searched for a way out. All the while, the goddess Juno hid him from the eyes of his enemies. With her protection, Turnus broke free, sprinted to the river, and leapt into the waters of the Tiber. The river god himself got him, carrying him safely to the opposite bank. Watching all this from the heavens, Venus became angry. She spoke to Jupiter, saying that Juno's interference was making the war unfair. Jupiter listened and declared that the gods must stop taking sides. Only mortals would decide the battle now, as fate intended. Exhausted but alive, Turnus climbed from the Tiber, only to see a new threat. Aeneas had returned, leading a mighty host of allies from lands far and wide. The war, it seemed, was only just beginning its final act. As soon as the fighting started, tragedy struck. Young Prince Pallas, son of King Evander, faced Turnus on the battlefield and fell. Turnus killed him, and the death of this brave ally shocked the Trojans deeply. Juno, watching from above, saw that the Trojans and their friends were gaining the upper hand. Afraid Turnus might die as well, she pulled him from danger and saved him from certain death. Meanwhile, Aeneas fought to protect the Trojan camp from every attack. On the enemy side, the noble Mezentius would not retreat. The two champions met, and when Aeneas hurled his spear, it struck Mezentius and left him badly wounded. Seeing his father in trouble, Mezentius's young son, Lausus, raced into battle. Aeneas called out, warning the boy to turn back, but Lausus refused. He could not abandon his father. In the clash that followed, Lausus was killed. When Mezentius saw his son's body, his heart broke. Pain and grief filled him. He lost all fear and rushed into combat, desperate to find Aeneas. He fought bravely, but Aeneas hurled his spear again. It struck Mezentius's horse, which fell and crushed its rider beneath its weight. As he lay dying, Mezentius asked Aeneas for one last kindness. Return my body to my people, so I may be buried beside my son. Aeneas, moved by pity, agreed. By nightfall, the Trojans had won the day. They prayed to Mars, the god of war, grateful for victory. Soon after, Latin messengers arrived at Aeneas's camp. They asked for a truce so both sides could gather the bodies of their dead brothers and fathers. Aeneas agreed. He said he wished only to defend his people, not to keep fighting. He suggested, let Turnus and I fight one on one so the gods can choose the winner without more bloodshed. So a truce was called, and both armies rested. The Latins began to admire Aeneas for his fairness and his longing for peace. But not all looked to peace. Another group of Latin leaders traveled to meet the famous Greek warrior Diomedes, hoping he would join their side. Diomedes refused. Remembering the suffering of Troy, he warned them, fighting the Trojans again will only bring disaster. The gods support Aeneas, seek peace, and offer him gifts. Many now wanted peace. King Latinus, who had long wished for peace, once more suggested that Aeneas should marry Prince Lavinia, and that Trojans and Latins should share the land together. But before the plan could be settled, a shout rang out from the city walls. Aeneas and his army were approaching. The time for words and waiting was ending. The fate of both peoples was about to be decided once and for all. The Trojan army lined up outside the walls of the Latin city, every eye fixed on one thing, the final duel between Aeneas and Turnus. The whole war was supposed to end with this single fight, watched by both armies and all the people of Latium. At last, Turnus stepped onto the field, flanked by his nobles and warriors. He looked pale, worry showing in his eyes. Across from him stood Aeneas, tall, strong, and ready for whatever came next. But trouble wasn't done yet. Moving quietly among the Latin ranks, Turnus's sister, Juturna, whispered urgent words sent by the goddess Juno herself. Don't let him face Aeneas alone, she urged. All of you, fight together for victory. Her words filled the Latins with excitement and doubt. Suddenly, chaos broke loose. The Latins broke the truce, hurling spears and arrows at the Trojans. The peace was shattered. The great battle started all over again. Aeneas tried to stop the fighting and call for a return to peace, but the anger and noise drowned out his voice. Then an arrow struck Aeneas, and his men quickly carried him away to be treated. For a time, King Tarchon of the Etruscans led the Trojan side, and the fighting was fierce and even. No one could break through the other. Soon the clash reached its strongest point. Queen Camilla, the fierce warrior maiden, charged into battle for the Latins with her band of fighters. She was a master archer, shielded by the goddess Diana. She struck down many Trojans, but at last a javelin found its mark and Camilla fell. Her loss shook the spirits of her warriors. Meanwhile, Venus watched her son from the heights of Olympus. She worked her magic, and Aeneas was healed quickly. With new strength, Aeneas rushed back into the fight. Thinking fast, Aeneas came up with a plan. He split his army into two. One group kept Turnus's forces busy outside the main city, while the other attacked the walls unguarded, with the best fighters away. The Trojans scaled the walls, opened the heavy gates from within, and the whole army poured inside. It wasn't long before they controlled the city. Smoke curled up from burning rooftops. Turnus realized he had been outsmarted. The queen of Latium, overwhelmed with guilt at all the suffering and destruction, believed it was her fault for encouraging war. Heartbroken, she could bear it no longer and ended her own life. At last, amid the smoke and heartbreak, Turnus raised his voice above the chaos. He called for everyone to stop fighting. He wanted the war decided by a single duel, himself against Aeneas. Let the gods choose the winner, he cried. Let there be no more useless death. Turnus took his sword and stepped forward to face Aeneas. Both men carried the hopes and dreams of their people. Aeneas, chosen by prophecy and blessed by the gods, stood ready. Turnus, fighting for his city and his friends, showed no fear. The duel began with fury. Turnus attacked Aeneas with everything he had, sword flashing. He struck at Aeneas's chest, but Aeneas wore divine armor forged by the god Vulcan. The blade shattered against it. Now Turnus was in danger. Aeneas hurled his spear, but Turnus leaped away just in time. Seeing their leader in trouble, a Latin soldier tried to pass Turnus a new sword, but Aeneas blocked him. Then Turnus's sister, Juturna, loving and desperate, gave her brother a magic sword. High above, Venus was furious that the gods continued to interfere, even though Jupiter had said they must stop. Jupiter, king of the gods, spoke out. No more meddling. If you do not stop, this war will never end. Juno, I promise the Latins will keep their language and ways even after the Trojans win. The duel raged on, but Turnus grew weaker and slower. Seizing his chance, Aeneas wounded Turnus badly, knocking him to the ground. As Aeneas raised his sword for the final blow, Turnus begged for his life. For a moment, Aeneas felt his heart soften, but then he saw the belt of Prince Pallas, whom Turnus had killed in battle, tied around Turnus's waist. With a single swift stroke, Aeneas ended Turnus's life. With the war over, Aeneas became the new king. He married the Latin princess Lavinia. Trojans and Latins joined together as one nation. In years to come, Aeneas's son Ascanius grew wise and strong. He founded the city of Alba Longa, the first step in a line that would one day lead to the birth of Rome itself. From this royal family, great leaders would arise: Julius Caesar, Augustus, and many more, who would make Rome the greatest city in all of history. And so, the story of Aeneas, the hero who carried the hope of Troy across the sea, became the beginning of a new world. I hope you have liked this story. Put in your thoughts in the comments about which stories you want to hear from us next. So, till we meet again, this is Monami Mukherjee signing off. Good night.